I'm Michael Krasny, and let me welcome you to another weekly episode of our global podcast, Gray Matter with Michael Krasny. We invite, and in fact, urge you to become a member of our podcast simply by going to graymatter.show, and that's gray with an E. Our deep dive weekly interviews include your questions and comments and cover a wide range of intellectually stimulating and engaging topics and issues with leading national and international figures, experts, authors, artists, and opinion shapers. Interviews distinguished by high content and technical excellence. In this episode, we welcome someone I call a tech savant. Rene Ritchie has been covering Apple and related technologies for years now, and he has the official title now of YouTube's creator liaison, a Canadian longtime independent blogger and YouTube content creator. He's known for several podcasts, including Debug, Iterate, Vector, Zen and Tech, Review, the TV show, and as co-host of MacBreak Weekly. He also served as executive producer of Mobile Nations Broadcasting. And I welcome Rene Ritchie to Gray Matter with Michael Krasny. Good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, delighted to have you. And it's been long overdue for the two of us to be in conversation. I should say that we will initially talk, of course, about YouTube, which, as I was saying, I read a recent quote that said the balance of entertainment power has shifted to YouTube, but it's also a place where more and more people are monetizing. And I thought we'd begin talking about that, though I must say there are lots of people with questions about YouTube, about Apple, about many things that Rene is an expert on, and we'll have him weigh in and respond to as many of your questions as possible forthwith here. But let's start off talking about, well, YouTube launching new ways to monetize, including a revenue sharing model for YouTube Shorts and paid service that's having to do with content creators that they can launch. There's all kinds of new things on tap for content creators, and you're right in the matrix of it. So let's find out.
Yeah, I think like the most recent announcements YouTube has made is around Shorts. Previously, a lot of companies did, or a lot of platforms did creator funds, which was a capped fund, which meant that the more people who made them, the smaller the smaller the amount each person got. But YouTube wanted to go back to the beginning when they started the YouTube Partner Program. And the idea of that was that, as cliched or like, I don't know, romantic as it might sound, is that YouTube and creators have to succeed together. That's just the best way going forward. And so they really wanted to get to revenue sharing. So now when you make shorts, you can get a percentage of the advertising revenue, the same that you've been able to do for many years now for long form video. And then they also wanted to make revenue, just earning more accessible to creators from the beginning. So there's now an earlier access tier for people to do fan funding, which includes memberships so they can do live streams and get super chats and super stickers, or make videos or do replays that have super thanks on them. So it's a way to get in like the door and just start earning revenue earlier on YouTube.
A lot more paths to monetize. And this is fascinating to me because it may have something to do with a bigger picture of the future of labor and the future of work.
Yeah, I think like what was super interesting to me is that YouTube very early on solved for distribution. And that means like anybody could make a video and upload it and theoretically have the same distribution as a Hollywood studio. The only gatekeeper became that upload button. But like it wasn't a career. A few people maybe became successful and had spin-off projects or came up with products or got brands deals and they were able to be successful, but not like every creator writ large. And I think that partner program, that ability to share in the ad revenue for making and uploading videos, that was sort of like the secret, the switch that was turned that made this whole creator economy take off.
Might be good, though, not to have too much expectation if you're thinking of dropping your day job or thinking you're going to create a unicorn. I mean, the reality is sort of like becoming a movie star in some ways. The ones who become really eminently successful are still few, aren't they?
Yeah, I think people will look at YouTube and they'll say, hey, it's like easier than ever. Everyone can be Mr. Beast. I think what it really is more accessible than ever. YouTube is the most accessible creative endeavor that we've ever seen. There's no gatekeepers. You don't have to become an actor and then get put into a high budget movie. You don't have to get a recording contract. You don't have to be signed to a major league sports team. You can go there all on your own and start uploading videos and have the potential to be a Mr. Beast. But it still requires a lot of work on your part, a lot of success, a lot of savvy to get to that point. So you can get your foot in the door, but you've still got to go all the way through on your own.
Well, you give a lot of good advice, and let's touch on some of that because you talk about, well, you say don't blame the algorithm, replace algorithm with audience. And I think this is sage advice for people who want to get into this world and make it.
Yeah, I think like there's a couple ways to tease that out. One is when you play, like when you say, "Oh, my video didn't do well because of the algorithm," or what video should I create for the algorithm, or when does the algorithm want me to post this video? You disempower yourself as a creator. You sort of give everything up to this invisible machine, and that sometimes is like reaffirming. It's like my video was great. It's just the algorithm hated it. And even like right now, we see the biggest media company and the biggest franchises in the world, like Disney with Marvel and Star Wars, struggling to get views on their content, and there's no algorithm there. It's pure like you have to give the audience what they want, or you have to grow an audience that wants what you're making. So I think like for YouTube creators, it's much more useful to think of the audience. Does the audience care what time I'm posting? Does the audience want this video? You can make anything you like. You can make the Avengers, or you can make an art house movie. There's different box office and different audience like appeal for both of those things. So I think once you make that mental shift of asking yourself, what does the audience want? What would the audience prefer? I think that's incredibly empowering for creators.
Well, creators often look at what the audience wants, but sometimes they look more within and they decide, what am I mostly interested in and what do I want to put out there and so forth. But there's an old adage of Kurt Vonnegut's, of all people, who comes to mind. He says, when you write, you should write for strangers. And maybe when you create videos, you should think about strangers too as your audience, as opposed to going inward. You got to think of audience, right?
100%. A really good friend of mine, Todd, he runs growth and discovery at YouTube. And he will often say, think like a viewer. The best thing you can do as a creator is think like a viewer. For example, a creator might say, I want to make this video. I want you to click on this link. But you have to make the audience want to watch that video. You have to make the audience want to click on that link. And that comes from like sort of like any form of enlightenment or attainment. You have to like suppress a lot of ego. You have to flip it around, ask a lot of questions. YouTube gives you tools like analytics. You can see which videos are growing your audience. And then it goes down to, like, as funny as it sounds, that old Simpsons analogy where if you find people who love what you're doing, give them more of the same, but different. And that's the fastest way to success.
And more Rene Ritchie advice, use cliffhangers more.
Cliffhangers, I mean, you have to be careful, because episodic television was good with cliffhangers because that's all you had to go. Like back in the day, 3 channels, then cable channels. YouTube is more the inverse of that. You have to do payoffs, like almost constant payoffs. One of the best analogies I heard was Survivor on classical television. You could wait an hour, build tension, build drama, throw somebody off the island. But on YouTube, everybody has, well, there's multiple platforms. Somebody could be watching Netflix instead of YouTube, or Instagram instead of YouTube. So first you have to get them on YouTube. And then there's so many videos they could watch, but it becomes almost like a risk. Like, am I going to click on this and am I going to really love it? So what you do is, as soon as they click on your video, you throw somebody off the island. And that way you told them, like, I'm giving you exactly what you wanted. There's no risk involved. You're not going to get bored. And then you spend the next few minutes building up to kicking somebody else off the island in a new and interesting way. So it becomes, because there are so many options, it becomes more of a payoff than a cliffhanger.
Any thoughts about clickbait for YouTube?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny. Clickbait is one of those things where, like, if you live in New York, anybody who lives even a block north of you is upstate. So YouTube creators tend to think anything they do is fine. Anybody who does anything more than that is clickbait. But I think, like, if you look at it purely dispassionately, the thumbnail and the video have to work together. It's like the book jacket and the book, or the poster and the movie. People are going to feel burned. They're going to feel baited if you overpromise and underdeliver. So the ideal is that whatever you do, the thumbnail, the title, it should be click worthy. Like it should get attention. It should get people to want to watch the video, but then you have to deliver on that. Or not only might they abandon that video, they may not want to click on another one of your videos again.
Take another idea of yours, since you're giving all this sage advice. Success means continuous reinvention.
Yeah. I mean, like, the job of the YouTube algorithm is to follow the audience, but audiences move. So creators have to follow the audience as well. And that's true in any form of entertainment.
But at the same time, you're creating a broader audience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But like, again, like, we're watching Marvel now struggle to maintain their audience. And, like, there are a lot of television shows, when it gets to the 3rd, 4th, 7th season, struggle to maintain their viewership. If someone subscribes to you 5 years ago, they're probably in a very different part of their life now. So you either have to continually refresh that audience, or you have to grow as your audience grows and it has trends and culture and everything grow.
let me distinguish a little bit between YouTube and podcasts, which you're also very involved in. What has lent itself more to a through line as opposed to, I mean, what I like to do with this podcast is keep people guessing what I'm going to talk about week to week. That was successful for me as a radio broadcaster for many years, as long as the discourse is at a high level and you're going in depth and you're really getting some meat and potatoes and vegetables into it all. I'll use the food metaphor because I know you're thinking about high fiber diets a lot. So I want to mention that. But it's a good metaphor. We want to mix it up a lot. And yet at the same time, there are people who say you should have a through line. You want to keep the same people coming back all the time to what they're interested in the most. Where do you stand on that?
I think like as much as possible, you can try and create the best of both of those worlds. So there are people who do variety content. And we even see this on television where they'll only watch a late night show depending on who the guest is. Some late night shows they'll watch because they love the host so much. And that's sort of like what every creator, what every actor, what every like personality wants to be, is that they want the audience to be there for them because that's the most loyal audience you could possibly have. But a lot of audiences are there for the topic or for the subject or for the guest. So what some really successful channels have done is they've created like an overarching framework. So two examples that come to mind, Dr. Mike and Devin Stone, who does Legal. They do movie critiques, reactions. They do news stories. They do interviews. But for Dr. Mike, it's always through the lens of people who are interested in medicine. So he'll talk about medical TV shows, what's real and what's not, movies. He'll do interviews with the Surgeon General. He'll do like debunking fads from TikTok. But people who are interested in medicine will be interested in all of those things. And the same thing with legal and law. They've found a framework to do variety content within a way that a large audience can still identify with. And I think that's sort of like what Alex and I did on Mac Break Weekly. People who love Apple, maybe there's different people on, maybe there's different products to talk about, but people know they're going to get their dose of Apple, and that's what they're there for week to week.
Well, let me go to some questions. Like I said, lots of questions coming in. I have more that I want to talk with you about, but somebody who says, what are your thoughts on the Vision Pro and the future direction for Apple in this category, since you just mentioned Apple?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think like the Vision Pro, Apple usually waits a long time to enter markets. Like they were 10 years before the smartphone and 10 years like of tablet PC before the iPad. But they got in early with the Apple Watch. Maybe some would say a generation before it was really ready, really cooked. And it feels like it's maybe 2 or 3 generations early for the Vision Pro. But they wanted to push that technology forward. And it feels like, and people will laugh at this maybe, but it feels like all of us want to get to Tony Stark and Jarvis, where we can just move things with our hands and talk with our voice. Say, hey, make this cherry red, pull this apart, do all that. But that is a huge arc over history. And things like the Vision Pro, where it's a helmet now, and then glasses one day, and then maybe contacts one day, and then maybe an implant, in a decade or two. I think Vision Pro is how spatial computing or mixed reality or whatever you want to call it, I think that's one of the next steps we need to get to that future.
And we'll go back to YouTube. Eduardo from Panama City says, developing a new channel. I think he's developing it in 2024. Good luck with that, Eduardo. What's the one thing I should do to get on the right path to success on YouTube?
If you're starting it out and you're not sure exactly what you want to do, try a few things. It has to be things that you're passionate about because it takes a while to build an audience. You might have to do, some of the biggest channels on YouTube, they made 10, 100, 1,000 videos before they took off. It's really good to go to those channels and go back and look at their first videos and just see where they came from. It's a good way of knowing where nobody started off being Marquez Brownlee or being Mr. Beast. People worked their way up to that. And then once people start, you start finding what people are resonating with, give them more of that. Make a video and then make a video that people would love to watch after that video. Like maybe a deeper dive or a broader look or a list of adjacent things. And then just keep looking and give people more of your stuff to watch. The most powerful part of YouTube is if you can get people binge watching your videos, because that will tend to get them to be recommended much more often.
Another question about YouTube from Marbell in Brighton, UK, and thank you for the question, Marbell. Most of the YouTube advice available is focused on content creators' style channels. However, since Vimeo's pivot away from film and filmmakers, curators such as ourselves here at Director's Notes have set up YouTube channels as homes for our short film, music, video curation, and BTS interviews, etc. What advice do you have for channels such as ours to help them grow and build an audience on YouTube and beyond, as things such as chasing trends rarely fit with our curated content? In part, you've answered this already, but maybe we can flesh it out some more.
Yeah, so there's a few things that every creator needs to ask themselves, because there's a continual tension between art and commerce, and that exists again in every form of entertainment, like whether it's standards and practices in television or dealing with a studio in movies. Like nobody just gets to make what they want to make and release it and get guaranteed to have millions and millions of people watch it. So I would say, like, are you in it for art? And then I would just upload. I wouldn't care. Like, don't worry about the views. Don't worry about the monetization. If it's truly art for art's sake, like, just upload it and don't look at any of the metrics ever. If it's not, you have to do that ego suppression again. Because a lot of times there are people who say, like, I'm an artist, the world doesn't understand me. There's sort of like a nobility, like a fallacy of nobility, where it's just like, it doesn't get me. When really it's like, you've got to push to figure out what the market wants. And in that case, it goes back to, like, you can make the Avengers and then you can make Knives Out. You're not going to get Avengers money. Like, most people won't get Avengers money for Knives Out. Most people won't get like the same box office, but they want to do it. And also sometimes making big blockbusters gives you the personal independence and clout to push through your personal passion projects. I would just never mistake one for the other. So, like, if you do want to make sort of art house films, those generally have a track record of not making as much box office or paydays as blockbusters, and just be like, set your expectations accordingly.
But I like what you said before about tailoring to the audience or thinking about the audience. In fact, I think you're on record as having said that the number of followers or subscribers are vanity metrics, and really the audience ought to be ascend over everything in terms of priorities, thinking for the audience, thinking of the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. A friend of mine, Dave Wiskus, said, like, made a good analogy. He said, like, subscribers are all the money you've ever had in the bank, which is an interesting number, but your current balance is way more important to you, more than likely. So people subscribe to a channel for a lot of reasons. Some of them to bookmark it, some of them to, like, give you a super like or a super thanks for, like, just making content they liked. People's tastes change. A lot of us don't go back and look at the channels we subscribe to. So the number is, like, it's a number, but if you go into YouTube, you can actually see who your current viewers are. And even people who subscribe to you, a lot of them just watch from the homepage anyway, because it's so much more convenient and there's such a better variety of content for them there. So I would think, like, it's nice and it can unlock features and you can get play buttons. And, some people look at it and think it's a really large number and that transfers into esteem or clout. That's all great, but it's how many people are actually watching your videos and what audience you want for your videos that I think really matters.
Interesting question coming us from Harshit in Daytona Beach, Florida. He says, since you were talking about TV, Rene, he says, what are your feelings about the Super Bowl commercials and especially behind-the-scenes audio described versions? You feel audio description should be added to everything? Also, what do you feel for creators with tools as the commercial outline?
So I think, like, what I love, and I think what YouTube is really good at, is providing options. Like, creators aren't a monoculture. They are creators who want very, very different things, who cover very, very different areas and for very, very different reasons. So I like for things like audio descriptions, YouTube is rolling out a feature called multi-language audio, and eventually it's going to be just multi-track audio. And maybe you'll be able to use that for multiple languages. Maybe you'll be able to use that for, like, the one track is the actual track, one track is commentary, one track is described audio. I think all of those things, making it available so that creators can pick and choose what's really important for them and for their audience. And I'm sure, like, maybe we'll talk about AI at some point as well. I'm sure as AI tools improve, the barrier of entry to producing all of those stuff will go down to, like, I'm sure, like, some people will still want to pay for, like, very boutique services. But for a lot of people, I think, like, automatically generated captions and subtitles, automatically generated dub tracks, automatically generated audio descriptions, that's going to really make YouTube and videos much more accessible to everybody.
Yeah, I do want to talk to you about AI and accessibility, but I'm also thinking about something that's, if nothing else, controversial, and that is the platforms as publishers and what that all entails. I know I don't want to get into legal rabbit holes with you here, but something that certainly occurs to me and that I think about, and so does the team. Any sage advice there, since you're giving and dispensing so much good advice here about where we're headed or what the trajectory is on that? Because eventually there's going to have to be some accountability and responsibility to a greater degree, isn't there?
I think it's interesting, and I mean this with, like, a lot of love and affection, is, like, I'm a Canadian. So, like, my political reality is very different than somebody who lives in the US, which is very different than somebody who lives in Europe with the EU, which is, And I think that's what we're starting to see is when the internet was young, like it was basically one thing, it came out of DARPA and just spread. And it was like very open in the beginning and text-based. Then we got pictures and we got video. And now a lot of countries are looking at it and thinking like, how do we believe, like, what do we think about this? So I think it's not just like, I think individuals are absolutely going to have opinions. I think different countries are going to have opinions on it. And I think as people, we're going to have to come together and figure, especially now, if like there's different laws in different places, how all of it is going to work. And I'm nowhere nearly smart enough to answer that question. I tend to think, you can make any sign you want, but you can't put it on anybody else's lawn without their permission. That's like on a very like basic fundamental level. But I'm just as curious as you to see like how it plays out, especially over the next 10 years.
You're spent most of your life in Montreal, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's where you are now. You're talking to us from your home base in Montreal.
Beautiful frozen Montreal.
Yeah. Well, also, how has it been? Just a little digression here, but how has it been in terms of, I know people, who travel to Quebec and go to Montreal and they say, they come from France and they say, this isn't the language that I understand that they're speaking here. This is like a totally different language. And yet there's that almost French nationalism that's still pretty rife, isn't it?
Yeah. Quebec, like the province that Montreal is in is Quebec, and it's very, very French. And it's odd because like, you don't really think about how different somebody from like, to my ear, people in the 5 boroughs of New York sound remarkably different from each other. And then you take people from New York versus like Kentucky. Then you take people from like New York and Kentucky versus England. And England, they can tell what university you're from based on how you speak. And then you have Scotland and Ireland, and like English is remarkably rich and diverse. But I think part of like the rich tapestry of English has meant that we can't be too fussy about it. Like even Gen Z talks so differently than millennials or Gen X or like baby boomers, greatest generation. Like there's just so much diversity in English that we can't be fussy about it. Where in French, like when you go from Haiti to Paris, to the outskirts of France, to Louisiana, to Montreal, people are just like, they're just not used to that same variation. So it sounds more different to them.
Yeah, there are people who speak English who are frankly impossible to understand, because my Spanish is fluent and I can't understand a lot of people who speak Spanish. I go to Argentina, for example, and the language is so Europeanized, so it's particularly influenced by Italian and German that the vernacular is almost unrecognizable. But let's go back to your bailiwick and where your sweet spots are here, because like I say, you give a lot of really important and I think good advice. One of them is that I took note of was the importance of thumbnail tweaks, which can be of real service in terms of, this is just really good advice. You talk about thumbnail tweaks in terms of creating magic. Let's flesh that out a bit for those who are interested in becoming video success.
Yeah. So like a thumbnail is sort of like the face of your video. It's like the headline on an article. Doesn't matter how good the article is if nobody reads it. Doesn't matter how good the video is if nobody plays it. And the thumbnail is the way that you entice people to play the video. So if somebody opens up the YouTube homepage or they open the YouTube app on their phone, they're going to be scanning around. They're going to be scrolling. They're going to have a lot of options. Maybe there's a Marquez Brownlee video or an iJustine video or a Mr. Beast video there. You want them to stop and look at your video. So you want to get attention immediately. And then you want to create some form of curiosity. Like, what promise are you making them if they click on your video that they're going to get rewarded with? Again, like you can't just want them to click. You have to make them want to click. So are you promising them an exciting story, adventure, set of knowledge, like challenge, like that you're making some promise that interests them or piques their curiosity so they actually want to click on it? And that goes hand in hand with the title, because the thumbnail by itself isn't enough. The title has to be intriguing enough or promise to answer their questions enough that they're going to want to click on it. And then the video has to deliver. And sometimes YouTube has a metric called click-through rate. Out of how many people the thumbnail has been shown to, how many have clicked through it. So like if 100 people have seen the thumbnail and 2 people click, 2% click-through rate. If that's low, you can try changing the thumbnail. Maybe it's just like tweaking the colors so it's brighter and shows up more. Maybe it's promising a different part of the story or a different part of the video. And we've announced already, we're going to be releasing a tool where you can ABC test thumbnails. You can give the system 3 different thumbnails and it'll show you which one caused people to watch the most of your video. And we're not doing click-through, we're doing watch time, because people have to click to watch, but then they have to keep watching. So to your previous point about clickbait, they can't just click in and then click out again because they're disappointed. They have to keep watching. So hopefully like tools like that will help creators not only get better results, but learn what makes a video more appealing or a thumbnail more appealing.
I have a kind of meta observation here, not having to do with Zuckerberg or that meta, but just the way you present. I mean, we're talking about success in video and success in communicating and performing and so forth. You come across not only with fluency and intelligence, but you also come across as being very dedicated and passionate about what you're talking about. I think enjoyment for any performer is central. I've always believed that. I enjoy what I do. That's why I do it. And you enjoy what you do, obviously, and that's why you do it. And it comes across as infectious.
Thank you.
Let me go to some more questions. And Maxfield, thank you for this question. He says, how does playback speed, I don't want to get into the weeds a little bit here, but we can interpret it if necessary. How does playback speed impact creator metrics? As a user, he says, of many accessibility tools, I'm on 1.75x persuasion. You want to translate that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So YouTube will give you two different metrics for your video. One is watch time, which is like the view duration, how long people in time watch your video. The other is percentage, how much of the video, because those can be very different numbers. Like somebody could watch 3 minutes of your video, and for a 6-minute video, that's 50%. For a 3-minute video, that's 100%. So like the raw watch time is different than the total retention of that video. So in this question, if somebody watches at 2x, like twice the speed, just to keep it simple, you'll get half the watch time. So if somebody watches a 6-minute video at 2x, you get 3 minutes of watch time, but you're still getting 100% of the percentage of the retention on that video. So you have to keep sort of both of those things in mind.
More questions for you. Let me go next to CJ in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. He says, can you tell us about your experience moving from a small organization to a behemoth like YouTube? Actually, you still have your channel open, we should mention, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still putting videos up there. Not as regularly as I used to, but I'm still putting videos up.
I think he wants to know, though, about the trajectory and maybe some of your insights in making that. It's a metamorphosis. So you can talk about it.
Yeah. So just for some clarity, like I started off working in product marketing. It was for like a mid-sized company. And then I went into tech journalism, and it was started off being a very small company. It grew to become like a bigger, small company. And then it got sold to a very big British company. So it's always been like a bit of an up and down. But YouTube is like, again, it's Google scale. The thing about like big tech companies, though, is that they tend to have smallish teams. So like the team that I'm on has like 4 or 5 people on it. So you're still like day to day. And by the nature of my role, I'm working mostly by myself anyway. But like often there's like, it's not as big as it seems. It's sort of like the world is endless, but the polygons aren't rendering too far in front of you until you go up to that point. So you really only appreciate how big a company is when there's like moments of like all hands meetings or like giant announcements. Otherwise it still feels, can still feel very small day to day.
You mentioned AI before, and I think there's going to be less opportunity for people to get jobs as AI becomes more dominant or more present in our lives. It's going to make some terrific differences. We've certainly spent a lot of time talking about it on this podcast. I'm interested in getting your insights here, though, because, again, there's all this shift in labor, and more people are going to avail themselves of your platform, YouTube, and try to make a living, as we said earlier. But I'm just wondering what AI, what you envision with respect to AI, particularly since it's going to be not only replacing a lot of jobs, but it's also going to be another digital divide. Yeah,
I think like I have several different ways to look at it. Like I think like AI, again, it's not a monoculture. Like there's going to be very different sorts of AI. In some ways, again, like YouTube democratized or made it made it possible for anybody to reach an audience. So like just the ability to get your video out there, no more gatekeepers, but still to produce things is very, very hard. Like it takes an Alex Lindsay to make the Chrome spaceship in Star Wars Episode 1. I can't do that, but maybe with AI I could. Maybe with AI I could compete with ILM or Weta Workshops in terms of what I can make as a single creator. So YouTube answered distribution.
I don't think even AI will compete with Alex Lindsay. I just want to go.
No, because he's going to use it too. And that's the point I'm getting at is like, I think that like, just in terms of what you can do, but like the ability to generate those ideas, I think are going to be even more, like two things are going to be even more valuable. I think we'll see a shift to like people who are just fantastic at a certain thing will have the ability to do more of that certain thing at a scale that they could never do before. So like Alex could make the whole movie basically instead of just like the ship in the movie. But like other people wouldn't have the imagination maybe to do that, or they would have to use other assets. So I think like that, like the advantage that Alex had is always his creativity, and he'll just have that. And I remember like in early on in my career, I was removing very painstakingly with a paintbrush cars from the back of pictures for advertisements. And then I got Photoshop and I used Photoshop's brush, and then Photoshop got content aware fill, and now it has generative fill, and I'm still doing the same job. It just got easier and faster for me to do it. And I think like that's one of the things with AI is that it'll become easier and faster for us to do the things that we want to do. But to your point, yeah, like it feels sometimes that I'm like a wooden toy maker watching the big plastic factory assembly line being built across town and wondering where my artisanal wooden toy is going to be after they're pumping out 3 million Jeeps a day on the assembly line. So I think that's very true as well. And it's going to have to be a balance between sort of unlocking the creativity of people and shifting us into what frankly the digital revolution has already started moving us towards.
Doug asks, how do you balance growing the audience by widening the focus of your content versus just trying to increase the number of viewers interested in your specific niche?
So again, like you want to think like a viewer, and you want to also figure out your goals. Like if you want to grow at the maximum speed possible, the easiest thing to do on YouTube or for any audience is that Simpsons thing, is to give them more of the same but different. Like if you go to a restaurant and you have a favorite meal and you know you can get that there anytime you want it, it's a no-brainer. You're just going to go. Like, I feel like that meal, I'm going to go. I know the kind of video that I get, because people don't remember specific videos. They remember the feeling that those videos gave them. So like, I want the feeling of that video. Like I want the feeling of a Marquez Brownlee video. I know Marquez is always going to give that to me. If the restaurant had random meals though, that might be risky all of a sudden. Like, I don't know what I'm going to get. I don't want to deal with that. It's too stressful. I'm not going to go. So if there's a channel that puts up random content, you might hesitate to click because you don't know if you're going to enjoy it or not. And then you're going to have to go find another video. And it's like, I don't want to bother. I'm going to go find something I know, like a known quantity. But it also, like, audiences move on. So it's always good to experiment around what you do. And if you don't care about growing fast, then you can just experiment even more. You can put up videos. Like, there are some channels that are really good. They just put up videos of what they like, and people enjoy that. Again, if you can get people to go there for you, that solves a lot of problems, but it's very, very hard. So you just have to figure out what your goals are and then adjust your expectations accordingly.
But I'm thinking that what you're suggesting here, or what you're talking about, has to do with an old axiom about selling. That, you give a customer what the customer wants, and the customer is going to come back. It's almost that simple.
Yeah, and if you start giving them random things, they might not come back. And like, you have to always, you have to decide how much you care about giving people what they want, but also what they didn't know they want. Which again, I guess like that, it's that, faster horses, give them a car sort of a thing. But like, yeah, you have to be very aware of your audience if audience growth is what you want.
And a question along those lines from Nathan up in Oregon City. He says, how do you think about building and maintaining a strong personal brand while working with larger companies? How do they intersect, or do you keep them separate?
So if I understand the question correctly, like I guess there's different ways of doing that. Like there's like, if Jack Nicholson is in a movie or Christopher Walken is in a movie, like it's Jack Nicholson or Christopher Walken. Like there's the power of their persona is so strong that it sort of dwarfs whatever role they're playing. And there are people like in the industry who's like, if you see iJustine in like an LG video, or you see her in one of her own videos, or you see her on a TV show, or you see her hosting CES, it's iJustine hosting those things. So again, like, but there may be places that don't want that. They want somebody who doesn't like outshine the brand. So again, you figure out what you want and then you position yourself to get it. So if personal brand is important to you, you make it so that people come to you because they want to attach to your brand.
Well, I should put in a plug here for the fact that we did, in fact, a podcast with iJustine. You can go to our archive or just go to our website and find it. And I'll go to Mike, who has another question. He says, hey, Rene, specifically for nonprofits, what special opportunities do you see open on the YouTube platform? What would you recommend?
So I think like whether it's like, for nonprofit, you can have a sidebar that has, like, if you're a registered nonprofit, you can actually create videos where in the sidebar, people can donate towards those causes. Like famously, if you go to Beast Philanthropy, Jimmy is busy building wells and houses and all these things in Africa, and you can donate to those in the sidebar of the videos. And as long as they're set up properly, you can put those in the videos you make. But I think one of the greatest powers for anybody on YouTube is the ability to project brand, to like create awareness. when we were talking about podcasts, like the biggest challenge for podcasts traditionally was you had to rely on word of mouth. So like if Alex and I did a Mac Break Weekly episode about the new iPhone, all that you would see around that are other podcasts. So if Marquez did a video on that, if John Gruber did a video on that, you would never know. Sorry, a podcast. You would never really know. There'd be no opportunity for the audiences to cross-pollinate. But on YouTube, you would see those videos. You'd be watching our iPhone video and you'd see Marquez's iPhone video and maybe Gruber's interview with the Apple executives, Justine's video, and you'd have an opportunity to click on those. And so it becomes digital word of mouth. So not just people telling each other about it, but the actual platform promoting those things or cross-promoting those things. And I think that's powerful, not just for creators, but for anybody who wants to build a brand, whether it's a commercial brand or a nonprofit brand. It's just finding out like what value you can offer to viewers so that the system knows what you're doing and keeps propagating you to more and more people.
Speaking of building a brand, your pedigree with Apple goes back to age 6.
And Apple II Plus. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
And from that point forward, you have become really one of the most notable experts on Apple. You have any recommendations about new Apple products? Or I was reading you were giving some people advice and actually talking to them about the easiest and best ways to return products. Maybe we can talk about that too for a second or two.
Yeah, I mean, there's different kinds of buying levels. Like for people who are enthusiasts, you're just going to buy the new everything. Like if you can afford it, there are people who buy every year. I know for like me, I bought the new Pixel phone from Google and a new iPhone from Apple every year since they've been coming out. That's just because I'm a tech enthusiast and I want to be there and experience all that. For like mainstream people, you buy something and then you use it until it stops working for you and you wait as long as you possibly can. And then you buy the next thing and you enjoy it because there'll always be something new. It's like that. I'm old enough to remember Bloom County, where Opus the Penguin would buy his Banana Junior computer and then see the new one by the time he paid for it and just have to throw it in the garbage next to it. So like don't try to keep up with every new thing. Just find something when you're ready for it and then buy it, enjoy it until you actually need something else.
But you seem to, particularly in your blogger days, to have kept up with just about everything. I mean, I wonder how you and people like Alex or Leo Laporte do that. I mean, just keep, or for that matter, our own Jeff Cohen, just keep up with everything in the market that's burgeoning because it's changing so fast, so quickly.
It was a little easier for me because I just covered Apple. Like there are some people who cover all of tech, like the Samsung and Apple and Google and like OnePlus, like all these different companies. And I don't know how they do it. Like there's just so many hours in the day.
I marvel at it. I don't know how they do it either.
Yeah.
It's something to marvel at, really.
I just did Apple, but I did more of Apple. So like I just chose to fill my time with going deeper, not broader. I think you make those kinds of choices as you build your career as well.
Oh, but you were up on all the technologies. You're being somewhat modest, I think.
I tried.
Let me get some more questions for you. Peter from Las Vegas says, I know you have not dismissed the Apple world. However, your existing path took you in another direction. What do you miss, if anything, of the Apple immersed life you had in YouTube?
So I miss like seeing everybody. Like it's like there's not a tight circle, but like there's a group of people who would show up at all the Apple events and we'd all be doing reviews at the same time and we'd be talking to each other and we'd be doing like podcasts about it. We'd show up on each other's shows. So I miss the community because I'm not doing like those reviews anymore. So I'm not part of those cycles. So that I really miss. But also I'd done it for 12 years. I've been doing like iPhone reviews. And if I kept doing that, that's great. But I also find it like super refreshing to force myself to learn and do and have passion about something else.
Jeff from Miami Beach wants to know, using RSS to publish audio-only podcasts to YouTube is the easiest method, but does the previous method of creating static image videos to manually upload offer any additional benefits or opportunities?
So, I mean, I would just be realistic with yourself. If you have a back catalog of 1,000 episodes and you want to upload them to YouTube through RSS or however you want to do it, like the ability for you to make I know there are some people who have actually recorded video podcasts for years and just never released the video version. So for them, moving to YouTube is just a matter of taking those files and uploading them. And now they have a video podcast. Because one of the challenges previously was just hosting was really difficult for video if it wasn't on YouTube. So that solves for that. If you don't have any video, you might as well do it. I don't know if people would want to watch the video rather than just listen to the audio if it's a static image. I think Gen AI is going to come in there too. And I think sometimes maybe that it'll be more exciting than a static image if it's like patterns that are moving or like a visualizer like we used to have in the old music player days. But I think there will be solves. But I think some people just want to see humans, have a human connection. And for them, the video podcast is going to be the go-to.
Big question, Rene. Encryption is a big lie.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So a few years ago, actually several years ago now, I was doing a story for, I forget if it was Safer Internet Day or World Backup Day or one of those days where they encouraged everyone to back up. And I spoke to a bunch of security experts and they were like, yeah, encrypt everything that you have, just like lock it all down. And I couldn't figure out how to do that with the backup software that I was doing. So I called up the creator of that software, Dave Nanian, and I said, like, how do I do that? And he goes, I can tell you, but you shouldn't. I'm like, why not? And he's like, because you shouldn't encrypt it. And I did not understand because like I was coming from a world where security was paramount. And he explained to me that there's fail safe and fail secure. And there is some things that you're going to want to fail secure. That means that you would rather lose access to them yourself than to have somebody steal them. And there are things that you're going to want to fail safe, which means that you would rather keep access yourself, even if somebody else steals them. And those things are sort of like wedding photos, baby photos, things that are of irreplaceable value to you, but not very important to anybody else. And he also pointed out that a lot of us have things that, like, if someone broke into our house and stole things, like, yes, there's data on our laptops, but there's so much other things of value in our houses that if the laptop is encrypted, like, it's not a huge differentiator for them. So I started, like, my advice has become, like, yes, like on your phone or things that you carry with you, it's more important to encrypt that. But if you have like a big photo backup or you have like a big family video backup, don't encrypt those, because if those drives are damaged, if you have a fire, a flood, and they're encrypted, there's no data recovery ever for that. But if they're not encrypted, you could maybe take that to even an expensive data recovery service and get those irreplaceable memories back. So I think you have to ask yourself that question before you encrypt anything.
So you have a recommendation for security then, in lieu of encrypting everything?
Yes. Encrypt anything that would cause you excessive personal or career embarrassment if it got out, and don't encrypt anything that you would feel that would cause you to get like divorced or cry for like 3 years if you lost it.
Good advice. Let's go to another question here. This is from Harshid, who says, while sharing videos on YouTube on the mobile side, you're not able to share from a specific timestamp or time marker in a video as you would on a desktop browser. Any thoughts of bringing this to the mobile side?
Yeah, I think like there's always a desire to be like to have as much parity as possible. It's just, and it's hard for people to believe when we talk about this. Like even big tech companies are always resource constrained. If you have an engineer working on one thing, they can't work at the same time on another thing. And then you'll hear like, well, you added 3 emojis. And it's like, well, the emoji person isn't the same as the video player engineer person. So they are each doing their jobs. So yeah, so the desire is to have parity, but like there's always different priorities. You can though go to YouTube on your, like the browser on your phone, request the desktop version of the site, and then you can share with a specific timestamp if you want to.
And here's Tony, who says, I got here late. I'm a big fan of yours. I miss you on iMore. What advice do you have for some with 100 episodes on YouTube? And plug for his podcast, Conversations with Tony Mobley, which I'm familiar with, and you probably are as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, it really depends on what you want. Like, if you want to grow like the channel and you want to like get more views and more regular viewers, go into your analytics, go into your audience tab and see which episodes are bringing people back to your channel. Like you'll see like high, medium, and low, and then not at all. You'll see ones that have very bad return viewership, and make videos that people would love to watch after those videos. So follow-up videos potentially, or more of those videos, like more videos on the same topic, because those are the ones that are appealing to your audience the most.
Some thoughts about growing in podcasts, the best way to grow and expand audience?
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same thing. Like if pure growth is your goal, you want to make sure that you're giving people more of the same but different. So like if you're doing a wide variety of topics, like for me, it was like big phone reviews. I had a bunch of different interests, but like big phone reviews would always drive the biggest audience. So I knew if I wanted like a high performing video, review a phone, even review that phone, like 2 weeks later review, 6 months later review, 1 year later review, like all of those things, or comparing 2 phones. So like I could tell I would know which videos were the big performers, and I would do more of those. And you can go and just find out like which of your podcast episodes are doing the best, and maybe find other people to talk around similar topics or to expand on those topics, to go deeper, to go broader, like all of those things.
You also emphasize the importance of transparency. Let's flesh that out a little bit too. What do you mean by transparency?
So I guess it depends on the context. Like my most recent video, I was talking about the difference between, like, in traditional media, when I was working like as a journalist, you couldn't own shares in the company that you covered. You couldn't You'd have to like disclose any conflicts of interest. You like advertising was firewalled from editorial, so you never knew what ads were running on your work, and the advertisers never knew what your opinion on any specific thing was going to be. So like it was safe in a way. But most creators are one-person shops or very small shops, so they have to do their own advertising. And some creators do equity deals with the people that they with companies that they cover. So I think like it's a brave, bold new world, and creators can generate much more revenue and much more value than they ever could before. But disclosing that stuff, not only is it like the U.S. Federal Trade Commission is very like adamant that you do it, but I think also it just engenders audience trust when you're upfront with them.
How about live streaming? Thoughts?
I think it's great. Like I think like when you look at the span of content types, short form video has incredible discovery potential. Like you can get a lot of eyes on you by doing short form video. Long form video has a lot of monetization options. So you can really like stabilize your channel and earn a good income on long form video. And then live really builds community. Like there's nothing like being live with an audience like you're doing, answering their questions, acknowledging them in chat, having conversations, getting to let them know you better, being like more casual. And I think like that also, like not to tangent too much for a second, but in a world where AI makes everything possible, I think there is going to be an equal and opposite desire to have things that are more sincere and intimate and connected in a very human way. And live, I think, taps into that.
Looking at another statement of yours, like I said, there's been a lot of advice that's come across the internet from you and various video performances. The time and opportunity is never before like it is now for entrepreneurial cheat code available to everyone. Now, there are many people who may not understand what the entrepreneurial cheat code is to begin with, but this is a kind of opportunity that you're seizing on. Why? What's it about?
So I think it's the empowerment of the individual. Like we've seen, and these are not the best, most relatable examples to anybody, but we've seen the Kardashian Jenners like achieve billion-dollar companies using their own social media as the advertising. They didn't have to belong to a giant company. They didn't have to like hire multi-million-dollar ad campaigns. They managed to do that through social media. And we've seen people like Mr. Beast grow, multi-million-dollar companies as a single, not like he has a huge team now, but like as a creator, it's almost like a single act of will. And that was probably possible in the past, but I don't think at this scale. Like there are generations of people who are millionaires now because of their YouTube channels who are in their 20s. And previously that would require, like for people to be millionaires in their 20s was probably inherited the money. Like there's very few jobs that could generate that.
And forgive me, some would say in the case of the Kardashians, some would say without any talent necessarily visible at all. I don't mean that to be unkind, but this is what's been said over and over again, but they can generate the dollars.
Yeah. And that in itself is a talent. Like I know some people will look at them and they'll be like, like why? And it's just like they found some way to connect. And there's another famous YouTuber, his name is Charlie White, and he goes by like Moist Critical and Penguin Z. And he sits there every day, 3 times a day with like an OG iPhone Air, headphone in his ear, like the white cord, no set, like nothing, and just talks about like the weirdest things and gets millions of views for every one of those videos. And people will say like, that's not high effort, but there's something about him that people attach to and want to hear him talk about. And that becomes very powerful.
Question coming to us again from Florida. Within the liaison team, do you feel there is a segment that can use accessibility as a helping hand for content creators from all likes of disabilities, especially with usage of tools such as iOS, Android, and other professional equipment?
So I'm not exactly sure what's being asked there, so forgive me if I get this wrong, but like there is no liaison. Like one of the interesting things about Google is like there's 3 liaisons. There's a search liaison, Danny Sullivan, there's an ads liaison, Jenny Marvin, and there's a creator liaison. So like we're teams of one, basically. And like we tend to work at the platform level. Like at YouTube, there's Team YouTube on Twitter, and there's creator support in YouTube Studio, which works at a huge level. Like they try to answer the questions of like individual questions and provide support to everybody on YouTube who has them. I mostly try to work at the platform level where I can see like how can we solve like weird problems that have come up for a large amount of people. But I think like at YouTube, you have whole teams like the user experience team who think very deeply, and the accessibility team who think very deeply about those issues. And there's all like motor accessibility and visual accessibility and audio accessibility and all of those things. I think we try to consider those every time we do a redesign or a product or anything of that nature.
Good to hear. Here's a question from Craig who says, is the shortening of videos a reflection of attention span or more of poor value pacing for longer videos? Can tools help viewers consume longer videos such as indexing, transcripts, or thumbnails?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I think like they're very different things. It's almost like just because there are now food wagons or food carts doesn't mean that like the French Laundry is going to have to close down. Like there's still going to be a range of experiences from like street food to like, like mom and pop restaurants to fancy dining, like fine dining experiences. I think we're going to have all of those for content. So if you're on your phone and you're waiting for a bus or you're in line for something, you can quickly consume a few shorts and that's like a really good experience. When you get home at night and you're sitting in front of your television, we've seen like a huge increase in television viewership of YouTube. And those tend to skew towards longer videos because like people just want to put it on and watch it the way that they watch television or movies. And we're seeing like movies are getting longer too, like Oppenheimer and the Dune movies. So, and there's 3 hour, like as we both know too well, there are 3 hour plus podcasts that people enjoy on a weekly basis. So I think it's less about the length and more about the specific situation. And then to what they implied as well, like, are you continuing to deliver value? Or as you would appreciate, like, from broadcast days, you don't want dead air. Like you can have a morning show every day for 4 hours, but you don't want dead air.
The old rule for those of us in broadcast journalism for many years was never have dead air. Under whatever circumstances, avoid dead air like the plague. Tony, do you think, Rene, that people will continue to embrace YouTube University for increased learning for general subjects or specific like office hours?
I think one of the nice things about YouTube is that you can reach very specific audiences. Like there's probably somebody who does the thing that you're interested in, and there's a good chance they've made a video about it. So like when I was ramping up my YouTube channel, I wanted to figure out lighting, and there was like a bunch of videos from like Mando Bytes and Crimson Engine that like explain how cinematic lighting worked. And like with the key light and the hair light and like all these different things. And I could learn how to YouTube on YouTube, the same for audio and all these different things. So I think like if you have those passions, the nice thing about YouTube being the world's second biggest search engine is you can usually find things to help you in it.
You want a really challenging kind of political question?
Sure.
I mean, Jerry in Aurora asks, what do you think of companies like Google portraying so many historical figures as being black, or companies clearly favoring Democrats over Republicans? That may be too hot to handle. You don't have to.
Yeah, so I'm a Canadian. We have 800 parties and we can't vote directly for our prime minister. So like there's like pluses and minuses to every country's approach.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was traveling in New Zealand, I was with a lot of Canadians, and there was as much animus against Trudeau. It surprised me, but it's like the feeling that you hear against Biden here from conservatives. I think that question came from a conservative perspective. I think it's pretty clear. I can infer that at least. And it shouldn't surprise us that there are a lot of people who we become so polarized. And so have you up to our north. It's very polarized now up there.
Yeah, I mean, I think more broadly speaking, I think, we went, and I don't want to get too deep on this, but I think we went from very like familial agricultural people where we had like our family for generations around us. And then we had an industrial revolution and then an information society where we reformed tribes based on interest rather than proximity. And that's created a very different dynamic in our society where you might have had like your family might have had a bunch of different like views and opinions based like on what you were doing in that literal village or town. And now it's like who you play video games with influences your tribal community. So like, I just think like it's a phase that we go through as humanity continues to change our social structures.
Well, we were talking about different accents before. You can still always tell a Canadian by the way he says or she says, they say A-B-O-U-T, right?
A boot.
Processor.
Yeah,
as opposed to.
Instead of processor. Yeah.
We got a couple more questions in here for you. Ted from Tulsa, Oklahoma says, what do you think is the biggest misconception about YouTube?
I guess it depends how you're looking at YouTube. So for creators, I think it's still that YouTube should like push videos for creators, almost like force people to watch our videos. Of course, our video is the best and everybody should be like, strapped down and forced to watch it. Where really what YouTube does is recommend videos for viewers. So like when I make a new video, YouTube doesn't say like everybody has to watch it now. But what'll happen is if somebody opens up YouTube and they've enjoyed my videos in the past, YouTube will recommend my videos to them and they may choose to watch it or not. And I think like once you start to understand again, like think like a viewer, that misconception goes away and you get a lot more empowerment out of it.
Any idea how many videos you've done over the course of time?
Ooh. I mean, I did 402 videos on my Rene Ritchie channel. And I think I did probably over 1,000, maybe close to 2,000.
Yeah. Well, here's Will from Savannah, Georgia, who wants to know, how important is live streaming for creators? Is this a growing market, and how should creators approach live streaming?
Yeah, I think there's like two answers to that. If you're like a creator with like a studio, like a gamer, or like somebody who does like professional video, like entrepreneurs, things like that, I think it's really important to create that connection. I think like you can use VODs, like recorded videos, to gain an audience. But if you want to really deepen that connection, live is one of the best ways to do that. And if you're like casual, like you're not sure what you want to do, or you want to just share your life, YouTube recently started doing vertical live, where you can just go live from your phone. It goes into the shorts feed. People can discover it. And that's, I think, much more casual. And if you're like, want to just dip your toe into it and start having a conversation with the world, that's a great way to do it as well. It's a good way to start.
You know, I happened to be listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking about how, because these are creators too, how a lot of young women are making pretty extraordinary sums of money just by talking to, or maybe availing themselves of perhaps certain kinds of eroticism appeals of one sort or another. I mean, is this the area that YouTube sees itself possibly even moving into? Because there's a lot of revenue in that.
I think YouTube is like, I think YouTube is a very mature platform, and they've really, like, YouTube wants the audience to start at 13 years old, and that's a conscious choice. So if things aren't appropriate for, like, if you're in the living room with your 13-year-old and it's not appropriate content, I think like you can absolutely make it, but like maybe it'll be age gated. So you have to sign in and show that you're 18 or over to do it. But YouTube has like a very not entrenched is the wrong word, but there's a set of community guidelines and ad friendly guidelines, and everything has to be a careful balance, because it really, YouTube only really works if viewers are watching ads and videos, and the videos are things that advertisers want to put ads on. You know, so you have to maintain that balance.
A lot of those guardrails are pretty loose, though. They become looser as the years have progressed, and the attention span is less, as well, as somebody alluded to earlier. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, they try to keep up with society, but society is funny because they don't always loosen. Like sometimes they tighten in some areas and loosen in other areas. But YouTube, I think, wants to like keep pace with television, movies, like not exactly, but like in the general sense of how standards and practices, or how the Motion Picture Association of America, or I guess back in the day, the Comics Code Authority, that's probably the worst example. But, you know, like how traditionally like entertainment has self-governed.
Things have loosened up in movies and television as never imagined, though, never even conceived, right?
I think in some ways, I think also like a lot of things have become less, like like smoking used to be abundant even in cartoons, and you don't see that anymore. So like I guess it really depends when you drill down what specifically you're talking about in any given time.
Well, let's find out, a little time left, but in your new role as liaison, what you'd like to accomplish, what you'd like to particularly set in stone as best you can.
So I think it's like, for me, it's less than like specific goals and more like principles. And that is like, I really want to help as many creators as possible have as much success as possible. And I tend to do that by working with the product and policy teams at YouTube so that they can better understand creators and empathize with creators. And there's already like, when I got to YouTube, I was just shocked is the wrong word, but I was heartened by how many people already thought of creators, and incredibly different types of creators, from like people had like Gundam fan channels or like Disney fan channels, to people who did like talk radio, to people who did like beauty or like technology, like just like, because there's such a wide variety of creators. But just to make sure that YouTube understands creators and what creators go through as much as possible. And then I spend the other half of my day talking to creators to try to dispel myths and misconceptions, and help all of us better understand YouTube so we can have as much success as possible. And I think anytime I can help like clarify something or stabilize something, or just help creators get past things that might be blocking them, I think that those are always very, very good days.
I may be revealing my academic background, but you sound in many ways more like an ombudsman, perhaps. You know, the ombudsman.
It's like part ombudsman,
yeah.
Part evangelism, part what is it? Where like when you let people just get things off their chest, like cathartican. I don't know what the right word would be.
They can catharsize with you. and
Yes.
connect with you at the same time. And cathect. It's a good psychoanalytic word too. Pleasure talking to you.
You too.
Let me, before I conclude here, I just want to extend thanks to all of those who joined us for this live episode of Gray Matter with Michael Krasny podcast. And thanks to all who will be listening on Apple, Spotify, or on our website at graymatter.show. And if you aren't yet a member or a supporter of this podcast, I urge you to go to graymatter.show. That's gray with an E. You can find previous episodes, including conversations with several other tech leaders and thinkers. And you can also email your reactions, thoughts, and recommendations to me at mkrasny, that's Krasny, at graymatter.show. And want to extend thanks to our outstanding Gray Matter with Michael Krasny team, Alex, Shannon, Chad, Colin, Jeff, and Colleen. And a special thanks to this week's guest, tech savant, podcaster, YouTube creator, liaison, Rene Ritchie. Thank you, Rene.
Thank you so much.
I'm Michael Krasny.
Bandwidth for Gray Matter is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.